Today on Data Radicals, I'm thrilled to welcome Sanjeev Mohan, a leading expert in data products, governance, and modern data architectures. As the former vice president of data and analytics at Gartner Research, Sanjeev has deep expertise in analytics, AI, and the evolving data landscape. Now, as a principal at SanjMo, he advises companies on data products, data operations, observability, and generative AI, helping them turn data into real business value. He's also the author of Data Products for Dummies, making him the perfect guest to break down this critical topic. Hey, Sanjeev, it's great to see you again.
Thank you, Satya, and it's such an honor to be on your podcast.
Oh, well, that's amazing. I'm glad you feel that way. And
I do, absolutely.
So we're both incredibly honored. I would love to talk and dive right into a topic that I think a lot of people talk about, but maybe don't have a lot of understanding of, perhaps, or content around, or maybe common definition around, which is data products. You wrote the book Data Products for Dummies. So maybe we'll just start off on the basic stuff. What is a data product?
So great question. Data products are kind of mired in a little bit of confusion. And the definition is a bit of a slippery slope because we tend to define a data product based on where we come from. Business people have their own definition, technical people have their own definition. So let me start from a business point of view. So the first thing that comes to my mind is that a data product is a reusable and a standardized data asset that is delivering some measurable value. Most important two goals that a data product conveys: one, it builds trust in data, and the second thing is that it has much better user experience than having to write SQL code, trying to join tables. Business owns a data product. There is some accountability. See, today what happens is if something breaks down, let's say my dashboard, and the numbers are not correct, I have no idea who to ask what went wrong, because there's so many people tools that are involved in this entire end-to-end life cycle of building my dashboard. So data product has a designated data product owner. It follows product management best practices, extremely important. We In the past, when we built, say, a data warehouse, it was a project. We would go spend a year or two, build it, roll off the team, go do something else. But a product has a life cycle, and all the way up to retiring it. So there has to be somebody who's responsible for it, making sure all the all the features are well documented. How do I access it? Is an API? Is it SQL? So that's something we term a data contract. How do I discover it? It is available in a data catalog or a data marketplace. So there's some self-service angle. So sorry, very long-winded answer, but I was just trying to give an essence of what is a data product. From a technical point of view, it could be a table or a view like in the past, or it could be a dashboard, a machine learning model. I'm even expanding the definition of data products to include AI outcomes like agents, assistants, RAG pipelines. As long as we're developing it with the product management principles and making that access easy and discoverable and building trust, to me, it's a data product.
Which is a pretty broad definition.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you mentioned the idea of reusability in your definition, and you
Correct.
mentioned the idea of sort of ongoing, non-ephemeral ownership. So it's not something that's just a one-time thing.
Yes.
And you also mentioned the idea of sort of trust and guarantees around trust. And you use the word data contract as well. Are those kind of the four elements of it, or are there others? And are those the four minimum elements of these things, or are even some of those things perhaps discardable in the definition?
So I would say those are trust being important, because we didn't mention the word security or governance even once. So to me, all that falls under trust. The quality is good, it's secure, it's versioned, And I know, just like an iPhone comes out, Apple comes out with a new iPhone every year, my data product can get version. You see, so Satyan, this is actually it's a very interesting concept. We always buy software with a version number, right? But when was the last time we ever talked about data having a version number? So data product is actually a way of bringing that version. So I can trust you. I can say this is the data that the marketing produced. This is my customer master, for example. But tomorrow, if I buy, let's say, HubSpot, and I get some new pieces of data, I may have a new data product, a new version number, backward compatible with the previous one. So this is how we are rethinking the entire space of data.
Okay. Uh, if and what are the problems that this data product thinking solves? So you mentioned this idea of sort of ongoing ownership and knowing where to go when something breaks, and even sort of trust. Although one could argue that trust could have been developed in other means without having to have a product in place. Like, why should I do this product thing?
Okay, so great question. The data products actually became very popular. By the way, I think the first person who came out with this term was DJ Patel in 2012, so a long time ago. But it really, yeah, he's the one who coined it. But I don't think his definition was anything close to what we are saying. Uh, but because he was coming from a different space, the definition of data product that we are talking about came from Shimon Degani when she was in ThoughtWorks, and she came out with the whole concept of data mesh. So the problem we were trying to solve was that as our data landscape has become more and more complex and the demand has gone up on data, the data centralized data teams were getting squeezed. They're getting demands from different places. Hey, I'm launching a campaign, I need this information by tomorrow, otherwise I can't do my campaign. Or this thing went wrong, or I need this information. So to break that bottleneck, she came up with this whole notion of decentralizing, or giving the responsibility of data to the business teams or the line of business units. So in a data product, what we are saying is that who understands the data the best? It is a data team. Sorry, the business team. Like, for example, if let's say I'm a hotshot data engineer and somebody tells me, here's your clinical data, and I want you to take this clinical data and derive these reports for me. I don't know what those clinical codes mean at all. I'm not a trained clinician, but if you give that responsibility to the business team and tell them you are responsible, it's your data, you curate it because you understand the meaning, and produce a well-defined reusable asset, then that is a problem we are trying to solve in a data product.
And in her case, she had at least in the original paper, there was a pretty rigorous definition of a data product. It had to meet certain interoperability standards. It had to meet certain, it was always a physical thing. It was always, almost, a set of tables or a particular standalone artifact. You mentioned things like models and all, which might be, for example, more consistent with the original expansive idea that DJ would have mentioned. I think one of the original data products in the LinkedIn context was people you may know. But in her case, it was more narrow. You seem to be sort of buying into a more expansive definition. Why is that? And did you, as you thought about writing the book, consider which way to go, and what was the impetus to go with the broader notion?
Yes. So I didn't want to define it too narrowly. I don't want people to come away thinking data product is something brand new. It's never been done before. Because if we go down that rabbit hole, then people will have even more resistance than they do already. So my goal was to not change things from a technical point of view, but change it from a process point of view. In other words, I'm saying that the artifact may be what you have been used to, but the way it is developed and the methodology that you use, the process is different. So that is why, I've diverged slightly from where she was. Also, one of the issues with the whole data mesh space was that there was never any methodology on how do you build it. It was always a concept. So data mesh is a concept, it's a theory. My customers are not interested in theory. They want practicality. How do I deploy a data product? So therefore I've had to diverge a bit from the purest definition, if you may.
Have you seen anybody that has adhered to the purist definition in a strict way and gotten to success?
I don't think so. One other thing, by the way, in a book is that a data product is immutable. And very quickly, people said, no, that's not true. Data products can change. So I think the reason why it has taken so long for data products to get the prominence is because we never really arrived at a ironclad definition. This is a data product and this is not. To be honest, we've never done that in IT. We've never said this is big data, this is not. This is NoSQL, this is not. Right? I mean, it's always even data catalog. We struggle to define things. And in fact, I was known in Gartner. A lot of my clients used to try to pin me down and say, define this, define that. And I always had this view right from the beginning. I can spend a whole inquiry 1 hour just talking about definition, or I can help solve your problem. What do you want? And almost always business users said, okay, let's not worry about definition. Here is a problem. How can we overcome this issue? Because we've been trying to do it for a long time. Like, you mentioned trust in data can be achieved in many other ways, but we struggle. For 40 years, we've not been able to get a handle over data quality, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I mean, this idea of like I can spend an hour in an inquiry trying to define things or I can actually solve your problem seems to be sort of the tension that literally exists with every data team ever. So,
Yeah.
there's lots of wisdom in that statement. So do you leave the book thinking everybody should be adopting data products? Is it, or at least the thinking that goes along with it? Is that sort of when you came out with the book, is that the conclusion you reached? Or do you feel like maybe not, depends?
So no, I completely. By the way, I have a podcast called "It Depends." So, uh, in fact, it's the ultimate consultant answer. So I would not. I absolutely don't want to give an impression that data product is the right way to go for every problem that you're trying to face. Absolutely not. There are problems that the systems that are running really well in a lot of organizations. Why would they rip out and then go down the path of data products? Because the problem with data products is it's also a cultural issue. It's a mind shift, and you have to think from a completely different long-term point of view. And we are so used to in IT to go like somebody gives me a problem, I'm like, yes, I got it, I'll solve it for you, and then you move on to the next problem. With data products, it's a mindset shift. And so I would not recommend data products to be the solution for every problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's funny because I think we've obviously looked at the topic quite a bit as well. And if you think about data teams, I mean, one thing they should be doing is, answering questions, solving problems. And maybe they're building reports, maybe they're building AI models, maybe they're building some recommender engine, like whatever it might be. They're just building something, and a lot of the work should be basically just solve my problem. I think this question of sort of reuse, value orientation, abstraction is where a lot of data teams and architecture teams spend their time, because everybody wants to do things better, do things efficiently, do things in the most modern ways, do things with the best tooling. And, data is so confusing. Why don't we spend 20 hours a day thinking about definitions? Which is not to be like that sarcasm isn't to be like sort of dismissive of that idea, but I do think that you do have to think about doing things better, doing things differently, doing things with value and reuse in mind, because otherwise you're just going to keep on being inefficient about your work. But when thinking about that life cycle, thinking about that value, thinking about that reuse is the fundamental thing you should be thinking about. And those are the problems that you're trying to solve. How reusable is this? How valuable is this? How much should I be abstracting, or how much trust am I building in this, overall? And I should be solving many problems with one thing. In the abstract, you mentioned this idea of sort of getting to practice. How do people actually do this? Like, where do I start when I'm building data products?
So now the good thing is there are a lot of companies, product vendors that are helping simplify the process of building, testing, deploying. There's a whole space of data ops that has now come up, which is how do I automate my CI/CD, my testing, managing environments, moving from one environment to another, and then into production. So that's one angle people are taking. Then there are these products that are trying to unify the metadata. See, so Satyan, one of the problems that we are seeing, maybe this is because of the modern data stack, the fact that we had an explosion of point solutions. So for example, humor me here. So I have an ERP system and I want to run some reports on it. So what do I do today? I have my ERP system. I have some data ingestion, transformation, some tool that will do change data capture or something landed into an object store like S3 or into a lakehouse or a cloud data warehouse. Then I put a data transformation product on top. I have a data catalog. Maybe I have a specialized lineage tool. I have a data prep tool. I have data observability. I have a data access governance tool. Maybe I have data observability. I have data quality. The list is endless. In each of these topics I mentioned, and on purpose, I did not want to mention any vendor names, because for each of these areas, there are at least 20 different companies that I'm aware of. So now the poor dashboard gets created at the very end. Each of these products has its own metadata catalog, right? I mean, they don't talk to each other. They have their own standards. So we never actually had is a common standard of metadata, unfortunately. Like, we got TCP/IP for networking. They all speak TCP/IP, but what about metadata? So I'm being a bit philosophical here, but the companies that are in the data product space are trying to abstract this madness, this really fragmented tool chain that we have. And so that to me is one way of going through it. I have even seen evidence these days of some of these products that are now using AI. I know Gen AI had to come in our conversation at some point, so why not now? So they're using some foundation model beneath these products. They're even trying to abstract and make it sort of like conversational. So in natural language, it is generating the code that is required to develop my data products.
Yeah, no question. I mean, we're recording this before an announcement that we're about to make here at Elation, and like there's multiple ideas behind it, but for example, along those paths, there's an idea of a data product. That data product would be exposed via a what is an MCP server, server that essentially allows you to talk to, or an LLM to talk to Elation, but more fundamentally the products that are encapsulated inside of Elation. And so this idea of sort of using data products as a mechanism to be read by AI, to be read by other applications, to be read by dashboards and people, to be read by any other arbitrary SQL database for transformation, I think is actually quite nice, because it means that the thing can come along with the metadata that describes it. And I think the point that you're making is really important, which is that you're sort of saying like, why haven't we had a standard for metadata? Because the metadata you might want depends on the use case you have. And on theory, like the metadata is almost, if you think about all possible use cases for all possible data, that number, the amount of metadata or the types of metadata could be infinite. But your use case really determines what products you build and what you need to do within the product. And so to your point, I actually disagree with the idea that it's immutable. It should be constantly changing and evolving depending on the use cases that are built on top of it.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know what you are launching, but everything you said is music to my ears, and this is why I do what I do, because when I see some of my ideas, start getting adopted, for example, the idea of having a data product be sort of the layer between raw data and my AI initiative or AI product, to me, that's the right way to go. And I was talking about this a year and a half ago, because my whole thinking was that at that time, a lot of models were hallucinating like crazy. Even now they do. My problem was that if I put AI directly on data, I know I had to go through this whole era of SQL injection. What if there is an LLM injection? What if it returns some sort of like output that is undesirable? Data products is already giving me the trust layer. It's curated. Metadata is published. APIs are published. There's a data contract. What if I put my agents, my assistant, my chatbots on top of data product? Then I can improve reliability and trust in my outcome.
Yeah, no question. And I think it becomes this. It also is the case that the data product can then travel with its own semantics and descriptions that would give the LLM confidence and context through which to talk to it. I mean, people have talked, to your point, a lot about this idea of sort of SQL injection, but even in the LLM context, there's a lot of confusion from turning what is a natural language question into an arbitrary schema. And as the schemas get more complicated, the LLMs get more lower and lower fidelity about how to understand how to talk to that underlying data structure. So the data product can turn it into natural language and give it enough context to have a higher fidelity conversation, even if it's just for human interrogation. So yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting use cases to make it tangible and real. And you can then version the data products as you are seeing what questions are being asked of that particular product, if you're talking about that sort of LLM oriented use case. So it's, I think, super exciting. And there's been a lot of talk about this idea of text to SQL, but it's a really hard problem because the fundamentally, SQL is about precision, and these LLMs operate probabilistically. And so,
correct.
You have to be very clear about narrowing the context window enough that you can not make the answers come back and be completely incorrect.
Very nice. Yeah.
Do you feel like, because I've talked to customers who are like, look, we have 40 data products and that's all we're ever going to need. And I talk to customers who are, on the flip side saying we have thousands of data products and we're producing more every single day. Does either of those sound right to you?
No. If you have thousands of data products and you're producing more every day, then to me, that cannot be a data product. That may be a table. You're creating a new view, and because of the way I defined it, you can say, well, you said a view can be a data product. So here you go. So this is the problem we had with data mesh washing, because there was no prescribed definition. And having 40 data products and we are done, that's a very static business that's about to go out of business. I'm sorry to break it to them. Yeah.
What's amazing is that these are, one was a large financial services institution, top end bank in one region of the world. The other one was in a different region of the world, but also a top end bank. So, very interesting, and both almost exactly the same scale, slightly different markets, but close enough in overlap, but literally two very complicated large institutions. And you get two very, very different perspectives. And I expect even within those institutions, you might have different perspectives as well. So it's quite different and interesting.
Yeah. And Satyan, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that a data product has a life cycle. We're monitoring it, and if we see that it's not being used, then we retire it. Just like a iPhone, it goes out of life. So if you have thousands of data products and you're producing more every day, they're not retiring. And if you're not retiring, then you're doing the way we did traditional stuff, where when we moved from on-prem to the cloud, we took all the temporary tables and all the crap we had collected over the years, we just moved it into the cloud, and then we wondered, wow, cloud is more expensive. Yes, it is more expensive because you took the junk with you. If thousands of data products exist, then a lot of them are junk, in my opinion. Then they're never being used, and there's no data product owner who's who's actively cleaning out these old data products. That's just my opinion.
No, that's deeply my opinion as well. I mean, I think that's true for data. So it's obviously data products are bringing software development thinking
Yes.
to the management of data, and yet it's true of data that you have to sort of throw away the things that no longer serve you. It's true of software that you have to throw away the things that no longer serve you. I mean, Alation, we built software over 10 years. Some stuff is wildly used, some stuff is not used at all. And you basically have to be thoughtful about pruning the tree and being very thoughtful about throwing away things that you tried that didn't work. You tried that worked for a while, but no longer work. You tried, but continue to work, and that you have to make better. And that, I think, is very clearly a parallel analog in sort of thinking through what you do. Do
Yeah.
you so how much of, now that you've published the book for Dummies, is how much of your work and your practice does data products represent? Is it a lot of your work, a majority, a plurality?
No, actually, unfortunately, it's not a lot of work. And the reason is because Gen AI has taken up so much of my bandwidth. And I'm even embarrassed to say this. In my beginning of the year, Welcome to 2025 newsletter in January, I made a bold statement. I read a book on AI agents, which I have not yet started. So now I'm like so deeply entrenched into the AI space that I have not really been paying a lot of attention to data products, unfortunately, and it just comes in waves. And I know at some point the AI agent story may actually temper, because we may have overhyped it at this point, and then it'll be back to data products. So Satyan, if I may say this, data products, data management is foundational. Right now, DeepSeek just came out, and so we are all into, oh my God, what's happening? LLMs are hot again. So we keep getting pulled into different directions, but the data will never go away. We'll all come back to data once some hype is over and the attention goes back to data. It's the only
Um,
moat. It's the only differentiator. Models are not differentiators. Agents are not differentiators. The only differentiator, the only moat a company has is its data.
yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the models themselves can produce new data, so to that extent, there's always some circularity there. But I think that's right. And obviously, in the business of data, I am definitely somebody who's drank that Kool-Aid. But let's talk about agents, because if we're going to talk about something that is relevant, let's talk about the topic of the hour. I can't believe we've gotten 30 minutes through a podcast and we haven't said the word AI and agents quickly enough. So something's bad's going to happen if we don't get there. So let's get there. Tell us, what is an agent, and what are people doing with them? And you're talking a lot about generative AI, like why agents? What's going on there?
Okay, so an agent is the next generation of robotic process automation to some extent. So RP on steroids. And the purpose of an agent is to, by the way, let me also say, I'm just trying to draw parallels here, because like if I say it's a brand new thing, then people will be like, wait, yet another brand new thing. It's like, when will you IT people stop and be more practical? Microservices architecture came out many years ago, and microservices became the thing. So to me, what's microservices in software engineering, data products is in data. Agent is akin to that. It's autonomous, which means it's operating on its own. is taking action on my behalf. It's like an agent, like a travel agent, for example. But the difference is that an agent is built on top of a foundation model, like a large language model. The best way to explain it is through an example. So there are four parts to an agent. It has to sense the source or sense my environment, reason what to do with this, come up with a series of steps, and then act upon it. So there's sense, reason, plan, and act. So I wrote a frequently asked question. This is how I defined it, just to make it easy for me. Now people are saying there's yet another piece, the fifth piece, which is self-learning. But let's keep that aside and look at an example. So let's say I have an agent that is reading my email, but because it's based on a large language model, it can decipher what is the sentiment of my email. It can decipher the intent. It can decipher or understand or infer who this email came from. So if the email came from my boss and the sentiment is negative, then it just goes up in priority, and it just sends me a text message and says, your boss is mad at you, you better do this. If the email is from my prospect, and the prospect says, I'm sorry, we cannot meet on this Friday, I have a funeral to go to, can we postpone the demo to Monday? Then maybe it's going to read that, understand the intent, go look up my calendar and move this meeting to Monday. So that's one example of a personal agent. The agents based on personal, agents based on a role. Like, what does a DBA, a database administrator, do every day? What does a supply chain analyst do every day? Can I automate that piece of work? Let me give you another marketing example. We have tools to go crawl the internet and look at rivals, our competitors pages, and see what they're doing. But how do I know what should I crawl? So let's say I'm in the competitive analysis business, and I have an agent, a research agent. What this research agent does is, it goes every morning before I come to work or I log in. It goes to it. It looks for similar companies in my space. Maybe there's some new content. So it is automatically on its own. It is scanning the web, crawling it, synthesizing that data. Because it's based on large language model, it can summarize that data, and maybe if it's advanced enough, it can do a SWOT analysis. And so I come to work, and now I know that companies in this segment, this is what they did yesterday, this is what they published, and so it helps me come up with the next best action. I still have to do the work, but all of a sudden, hours and hours of research time has been taken away from me. I still don't know, did it do a good summarization, because this is all unstructured content, right? So there are no quality metrics. How do I know it did a good job? So there is a little bit of that hallucination, unreliability, which is inherent in a probabilistic model, like you mentioned earlier. But it's not replacing my job. It is making me so much more productive. It is as if I, an individual contributor, am now a team leader, and I have 10 subject matter experts who did the work for me and provided me with their summary.
So do you think that these agents will replace jobs?
Absolutely not. So some, like, even today, there's some CRM companies that have gone on this journey to make SDRs. So what is going to happen? And I have full conviction on this. It is going to transform every single job in the world. No question about it. People say, well, only thinking jobs will be affected, not physical labor. Even those, through LLMs embedded in robots, and it's already happening. Every job will change, but new jobs will be created. And what those jobs will be? It sounds like science fiction. Yeah, what new jobs? If you go back to way back in history, in 1800s, 90% of US employment were farmers. They had no idea that in 100 years, they'll be building cars. And then another 100 years, by 2000, only 3% of US workforce will be farming. Rest will be doing all these jobs that never existed. We don't have these people sitting in a telephone exchange, as a switchboard operator connecting those cables that we used to see in the movies from way back. We don't have a whole army of tellers dispensing cash because we use an ATM. So there will be absolute chaos to some extent, but new jobs are going to be created. It always has happened. AI is not going to just overnight just say, all of you people, you're no longer needed because now AI is doing it. There will be maybe like coding, for example. Coding is a perfect example because the coding assistants have become really good, but you still need coders. You cannot rely on them. Maybe they've taken away documentation of code from me. Oh, thank God. I never liked coding documentation. Maybe they've taken away writing test cases, but I'm still needed to do that human reinforcement and make sure it's correct. It is so we can go on forever, but I
No,
have
but I
full
think what you're
conviction.
saying is some jobs will go away, which I think is right. Some
Yes,
jobs, I mean, some look,
100%.
I think some jobs will go away, and
Mhm.
other jobs will be created, and I think that's true. I mean, there was the printing press, which meant that you didn't have to write as much on papyrus and or other bits of written note, and certainly jobs went away, and the switchboard job went away, but cell phone, retail, so customer associates came into play, and maybe one day those jobs go away and something else comes into play. And I do think that what's exciting is that your imagination gets you a lot farther.
Yes.
Um, and your intentions get you a lot farther. And, as I think about the work that we do, the work of data management, um, much of this work is work that nobody really wants to do
Yeah.
or really should want to do. I mean, nobody should wake up every day and be like, "Oh, let's go steward some data this morning." Like,
Yes.
that's like it's not an interesting. I mean, it's not a bad way to spend time, and it's not a useless way to spend time. But most of the people that could be doing that work could be spending their time in higher order ways. And so, I personally believe that it's going to change not just the jobs, but also the shape of the many of the markets that we operate in.
Yes.
Including,
Yeah.
including the ones that like I and we, like, 10 years ago, we built this thing called the data catalog. And I think the way in which these things are going to be used is very different.
Yeah.
And it's going to change materially.
Exciting. Head these times maybe head spinning, but they have never been so exciting in our entire career. This is the
I,
golden age of data.
it's funny because I say this as well. I mean, I think that when we launched this company, the work and the state of the art was this idea that in sharing knowledge, the best way that we could do that was to put it in a static page on the open internet, and somebody could write it and a search engine could index it. And if we were lucky, somebody would come to it, they would read it, and they would understand it. The iteration on that was things like social media. People would ask questions, people would get answers. But now you can literally get the knowledge at the moment where you're actually doing something. And you can have the knowledge summarized for you based upon a thought. Like you can summarize, like, yesterday I took a set of emails and basically an outline that I'd written. And I was like, hey, why don't you write an essay based upon all of these emails and the output that I'd written? Organized it perfectly. I had to edit a few things. Some of it was completely wrong, but still got me farther and way farther along than I otherwise would have gotten.
Hmm.
And that, I think, is pretty exciting. And I think it's going to change all of these things. I mean, to your point, you talked about these things like quality and like master data management and data products. And these are all intermediate artifacts that people ideally would never even have to think about, because what they really want to do is just reduce customer churn or increase their retention or grow new products and build them. And so, yeah, I think it's super, super exciting. Do you, I mean, given the intersection of these two disciplines, do you feel like, how quickly do you see the change happening? Like, where does the world of data go in this new age of agents and LLMs and generative models? Like, What excites you? How quickly do you see change occurring?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you're asking these questions because it's making me think. Uh, what has formed my perspective? Like, what did I do in the past that makes me think like this? And I think after having been in this industry for so many years and having seen dot-com boom and bust, to me it's the same story is repeating. I'm not saying there's going to be an AI bust, because I think companies have a lot more money than they did during dot-com boom. But what happened in during the World Wide Web, internet heydays, things came crashing down, and years went by. There was a company called Webvan. In during my dot-com boom days, it was a celebrated success of the internet, and it was most spectacular disaster. But then now we rely on Instacart, which does exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
So while when the dot-com bust happened, people's attention moved away from the internet, and they're like, oh my god, that was such a bad dream. We've moved on to other interesting things. But the technology never stopped, innovation never stopped, and we came back with something that did my entire US tax code. And I mean, it was just fascinating to see, with the mobile, with social media, all the changes. Same thing's going to happen to AI. We may have detractors, we may criticize it, we may point its deficiencies, like hallucination. It's going to get better. It's actually, the trajectory is even faster than anything in the past. So I think next year, when we are talking again, if we are getting ready to meet up at Gartner Data and Analytics Summit somewhere in the world, you and I will come with our agents. That's how fast it'll be next year. That's my prediction. And I think Gartner will have magic quadrants. There is a concept I laid out in my trends for 2025, where I said, to build these agents and deploy them, you need an agent management system. So the prediction I've made is that there will be a magic quadrant in 2026 on agent management system. Uh, so AGI, I don't go that far, and I don't even care too much about AGI. I've delegated to Elon Musk to talk about it, but maybe that'll take longer, and I don't really care. But AI is going to get smarter and better faster than we know, and we will have these small agents. Maybe we won't have super complicated workflow in an agent, but small personal agents, absolutely, I see that next year.
Yeah, yeah, I see that too. And do you feel like those? But what I don't know is whether I think they're going to be shaped like personal agents. I mean, I think there's
Yeah.
lots of different ways these things can be shaped, and generally speaking, um, they're going to be everywhere, and they're going to be disparate, and they might be conflicting and even confused at times. But there's going to be lots of different ways we use these things, and some of the most useful will probably be totally unpredictable. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think that people have to use them. What's been remarkable to me is actually how much some people don't use them at all, and yet other
Hmm.
people use them all the time. Um, and so there is a little bit of a learning curve and a little bit of an acceptance of it seems, of how tech forward are you and how much are you willing to sort of lean into some of these things. Do
I,
you? No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, some organizations may not even have a choice, because if your competition is doing it, then why would you wait? You'll be forced into this space, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. It's a really fun world that we live in, because I think a lot of human labor that was oriented around knowledge work is going to take a very different shape, and um, the skills you'll need for tomorrow are going to be very different.
Yeah.
And so, where you obviously analyze a lot of things, talk to lots of people, and your job is to sort of see and look at different problems. Which problems are you most excited about getting solved in the next year? Like, where do you see the most innovation happening? Where are people talking um, about what could be done?
Yeah. So one thing. So I've been very intrigued by all the work that's going on in Apache Iceberg and other table formats. So I'm super excited to see that we are finally going to use unstructured data and structured data together. So far, all my career has been on structured data. But now, thanks to these embedding models, I can read an unstructured data, put it into maybe a vector database or any database for that matter. Maybe not even put it into a database, just read them as these PDFs come and go. So that that stack which is needed to me should be unified. I don't want to live in a world where, oh, for this use case I have this stack, and for AI is this, for data it's that. No, it's all data, in different formats. So having this disaggregation of analytical tools, I think metadata, semantic layers, they all become extremely critical, because to me they sort of unify. There's so much emphasis these days on these catalogs sitting on top of or meta stores that are sitting on top of iceberg, like table formats. So from a technology point of view, I'm very interested in seeing how structured and unstructured data come together, and how we simplify and unify the stack with the governance on top, and with any analytical tool I want to bring. And by the way, that analytical tool doesn't have to be Spark or Pandas or Snowflake or Databricks or Dremio or Starburst. It could even be my LLM. My AI agent or assistant is a compute engine that is going through this unified architecture.
Mm-hmm. So table formats, unification
Yeah.
of structured and unstructured data. What else? What else is of interest?
Governance, which is going to be very interesting, because when I say governance, I look at it as AI assisting governance, like better inference of relationships, for example, better data quality, uh, discovery, and things like that. And then there is governing AI itself. So there are two separate things. One is greenfield, which is I have a governance tool. How do I supercharge it with AI? And so that's brownfield, because it only exists. And the other is greenfield, which is how do I get a handle over all of my experimentation? What value did I get? And then put it into production, monitor what I'm doing with my AI, uh, for cost, for hallucinations and things like that.
Hmm. It's interesting. You described the idea of infusing AI into the governance tools as brownfield, and I actually think I might take the exact opposite perspective. That I think that it'll change how the work is actually completely. It'll orient the work and change it in a way that may even change the shape of the tools themselves.
And you could be absolutely right. So sorry, I didn't want to interrupt here, but I just had even this idea. The disruption can be so big. So just the way you are saying that it's actually greenfield, it's not brownfield. I've spent my entire life doing ERD diagrams. That was actually, data modeling was one of my favorite things, to fire up Irwin and then just model. Why do I need to do third normal form data modeling? Why can I not leave data as it is and then just use a foundation model to infer the relationships?
Yeah. There's that, and then there's also this question of, well, let's even say that I had to do some form of, I mean, all of that work is work to essentially allow systems to talk to other systems more efficiently, or people to talk to systems more efficiently.
Correct.
And ultimately, this point of like, well, I just want to do something.
Yeah.
I just want to know how many customers or transactions this customer had, and I don't want to know that I have a transaction table and a customer table, then I have to join them on, as of date and customer ID in order to be able to get to something that actually makes some sense. Like, can you just give me the answer?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
this
Yeah,
is, I think, the interesting thing about like these models is that it just can abstract so much from what you otherwise would have to do.
yeah.
So no, it's super exciting. Sanjeev, what are you, any worries or anything that you're concerned about, or I mean, everybody talk, you seem very optimistic about this in age. Any concerns about all the stuff that's happening? And
So I left Gartner 3.5, 4 years ago because I wanted to be on cutting edge. In Gartner, I had to be very careful not to steer my customers into what might be a harebrained rabbit hole. Now I get to do exactly that. So that's my concern sometimes, that I'm letting my wild ideas run free and I'm pushing the envelope. Sometimes I'm ripping it apart. So sometimes, I see there's so much of interest on AI agents, and I sometimes fear. I hope I haven't added fuel to the fire and created this rosy picture of how things will be, and it turns out that we overestimated the benefits, and we have to take a pause. So so basically, I guess what I'm saying is I don't want my enthusiasm to come in front of what's practical, and because that's my goal, is to provide practical advice. But I don't want my customers to hold back. I want them to go out and experiment, find it for themselves. Maybe data product is not the right answer for you, and maybe AI agent is not the right answer. But unless you experiment, how do you know? So that's in fact, all my customers, when I'm with them, I'm just taking them on a journey to be bolder and faster. So
well, sounds like we found the episode title. Unless you experiment, how do you know? With
yes,
that, with that,
yes,
with that,
yeah.
with that permanent question, I want to say thank you, Sanjeev. You've always a delight to speak with you.
Likewise.
Your enthusiasm and sort of wisdom both shine through. So great to see you, and I look forward to seeing you in person in a couple of days.
Yes, thank you. Take care.